Hello, welcome to Karting 1, welcome back to the channel. Haven't posted a video for a while. I don't know, it doesn't make a genius to understand that I'm not the biggest fan of modern karting, and it's difficult talking about it and not just coming across as a moaning on git. I thought I'd do this video because there's a little bit of controversy going on, and I think something needs to be said because obviously what's happened is Freddie Slater won the Junior World Karting Championship at the weekend on the track, and then got a nose cone penalty. He lost the championship, finished second, and actually, weirdly enough, the 5-second penalty put him back to second. And he was only a couple of attempts from winning the whole thing. And you saw pictures in the paddock from the live stream, and it didn't look fantastic for the sport. And I think Vroom wrote an article and said, it's time for change and that kind of stuff. But I preface this by saying I'm not a fan of the drop down nose cone penalty system, but I'm less of a fan of big plastic pods on karts, like especially the modern stuff. I don't like it. I think it promotes contact and that kind of stuff, and I think it takes karts away from what they really are. So with that in mind, if we say that modern karts have to have plastic, then we have to admit and have to accept that drop-down nose cone penalties is the only real system to regulate driving standards. As horrible as the result is for Freddie Slater, the drop-down nose cones are kind of a necessary evil. Now, I think there's a bit of a reaction to it because a few people were watching the live stream and that, but karting isn't a spectator sport, it's a competitor-based sport. So you have to take into consideration the bigger picture of the actual competition of karting and what drivers experience less, and you have to be less concerned about what people are watching. I would love people to watch karting. I'm just saying what it is, not what I'd hope it to be. So that's something you have to take into account. So how it looks as a viewer is secondary to other factors that the governing bodies are more concerned about. Now, the backlash is mainly driven, I think, by a lot of parents in the sport who've experienced drop-down nose cone penalties, and they feel similar way, that maybe it was unfair, it wasn't deliberate contact, an illegal move. It was basically, their son or daughter lost a good result because of it, and they feel like there's an injustice. And I think what's happened is we've got a generation of people that have come into karting post the introduction of this nose cone system, and they weren't there before it. And if you were there before it, because the parents naturally, because what happens is people enter sport at 8 and they leave at 16, and that's kind of the cycle, and that's an 8-year cycle, and it's been like 7 years since the things were introduced. So we've got a generation of people that just don't know what it was like before this system was in place. And as someone that was there, and I watched a lot of racing, especially like 05 to 2014. The decline in driving standards was horrific, and I mean horrific. At the start of a race, you got 2 rows of 15 karts, and at the start you just had to be stuck on the kart in front, and by the time you got into the first acceleration zone, it was like a spray of karts, because you had to, if you weren't partaking in the loading, you were going to be the victim, sort of thing. And it's like a collective sort of agreement just to drive in a manner not congruent with clean racing, and it's like a collective agreement. It's this weird psychology thing, and as a driver, the drivers knew that the officials couldn't regulate it, because if you're an official, if you've got 30 karts and they all agree to go into the first corner nose to tail, how do you assign blame? Who do you punish? So a system needed to be introduced that was a disincentivization for contact, especially at the start of races, because it was so... I don't think people appreciate how bad it is. You watch a kart race now and there's a crash at the start and you think, oh, that's not great. But back in the day, it was a regular occurrence, and especially at big one-off meetings like Kart Masters or whatever, it was so bad. They call it Crash Masters for a reason. I know people will come back and say it still is, but I'm not sure people appreciate just how bad it was. It wasn't like a bit of contact between 2 drivers, it was collective contact at the start of races. So therefore I had to make a decision. Now, a lot of people are disappointed with what they introduced, but actually, in essence, it was kind of a necessary evil. It was a disincentivization for contact, and you needed a kind of catch-all system, a system that caught almost all occurrences of contact, because most occurrences of contact are consequences of illegal contact. And 90% of contact, front to rear, is illegal essentially. So when you have a catch-all system, you go, right, we're going to get every single case of contact. Unfortunately, there's a collateral damage, and that's maybe 10% of contact is not illegal, it's accidental contact or whatever. So by introducing this system, overnight the starts cleaned up massively, because you knew as a driver, if you hit someone at the rear, you might get a penalty. So everyone was disincentivized to have contact. You were rewarded by not loading the car in front. So it cleaned up the starts massively. Now the problem is, when you go from removing maybe 80% of the deliberate contact from the sport, because people aren't doing it anymore, you're left with a situation where a lot of contact is kind of, accidental or that kind of stuff. So you get a greater proportion, I guess, automatic with a catch-all system. Suddenly the proportion of people that are getting punished for something that is just innocuous, whether they touched a curb or a stone hit their bumper, suddenly they're getting punished for it. But it's a bit of an availability bias going on here. So if you're watching a race and someone gets a drop-down nose cone penalty, one person, and you know it's because it wasn't their fault at all, whatever, something happened and the nose cone went in and they got a 5-second penalty. You look at that and go, that's a great injustice. But what you do not see is that the amount of contact that the actual system prevented. Okay, so if you could run it by side to side, you can't do it. You've got an availability bias. You just see what's in front of you. So people see this great injustice and go, that's unfair. But what you don't see is what would have happened if you didn't have that system in place. And it probably would have been 5 drivers off at the start into the barriers. And that is a greater injustice. So the problem with the system of nose cone is that basically when you fix a problem, and this happens in humans, the next problem, which is actually from a utilitarian point of view is less important, as harsh as that sound, people get as angry about that as they ever did about the contact. So what's happened with Freddie Slater at the weekend? Obviously he lost the world championship and it wasn't his fault by the accounts that I've read. It was something hit his nose cone and it got knocked in. By all accounts, people are kind of thinking, we need to change the system. And I think, well, the system works because we don't see so many accidents at the start of races anymore. So, this is just collateral damage. Now, I might repeat myself here because I've already recorded this and I'm redoing it, so I might forget stuff and re-say stuff because my memory's going back to the previous recording of this. But this, because Vroom wrote an article about it, and this is really what motivated me to do this video. I'm not, modern karting, I'm not too motivated about anymore. But this I am, because it's a weird thing, So my solution is no plastic. And no one wants to go down that. So if you want plastic on your karts, this is what you're going to have a necessary catch-all system. Now, a lot of people are coming in and saying we need a new system, and they'll say an appeal process. The problem with an appeal process is if you have, say, 5 pushbacks a race on average, that's quite a high percentage, but let's say, So if you appeal, so let's take an appeal, okay, a hypothetical appeal. So your driver comes in, got a drop-down nose cone penalty. He says, I didn't do anything, it just dropped down, I don't know why. So you can appeal that process. Say you hit a rock or whatever, right? So you appeal your penalty. So you go to the stewards and they go, what are you appealing it for? He says, well, I hit a rock. So I go, okay, you've got to prove to me that that the nose cone penalty was not through deliberate contact, illegal contact. So then what you do is you have to then go, right, the only way to do that is through video. Because if you go, right, lap 3, I hit a stone, Well, no one saw that, mate. Tough luck, your appeal's rejected. So then, if you're going to have an appeal process, you imply there has to be video. So that would be on board or CCTV, and probably a combination of both. I mean, these are hugely expensive operations. So you put your appeal in. You say, "I hit a thing," so I have to load up the video. All this is taking time, and I'm a steward here. I'm an official being hired to review these cases. I'm going through the video, and I have to watch effectively the whole race, because I have to judge when the nose cone got knocked in. So if you said it happened on lap 10, that's great. But I have to watch all the video to make sure that that was correct and it didn't drop down on an earlier lap. Now you might have to, if you had a nacelle panel camera here that pointed down to the bumper, that could ascertain whether the nose cone, when it came in, but it would be hard to go through all of that video for one case. And if you've got five appeals, that's five things to check. And as you can see, if that happens every single race, you soon get a backlog of appeals that build up, and then it comes time to grid the final, and you're like, well, no, we can't, because we haven't gone through all the appeals yet. And suddenly you're in a position of like a complete bureaucratic mess. It's a nightmare. You can't get the grids for the final. Everybody's appealing, because everybody, by default, you have to appeal your nose cone penalty, because it might have been an injustice, and someone will say, oh, you might have to limit how many appeals you can do in a day. But on average, a driver might get one nose cone penalty every other race, so you're gonna appeal every time by default, and then what happens is, if the appeal is 50 quid or 100 quid, you basically give an advantage to those that can afford it, right? And now people are saying, oh, this is elite level competition, it doesn't matter, blah blah blah, but at the end of the day, I don't like this elitism of 50 quid's nothing, it does my head in, right? So you're in a place where you've got a race day, and now you've got 50 appeals to deal with, and it becomes a bureau. It's not feasible. It's not workable. You need a system that's a judge of fact. It's yes or no. The nose cone penalty is yes or no. And over a season, it would even itself out as a driver. You'd get a nose cone penalty for real contact. You might get the odd one that's just unfortunate. And the problem we had at the weekend is you have these big one-off events that are one race, and that increases the odds of an injustice happening. For Freddie, it's unfortunate. If the World Championship was a 5-round affair, this would have meant he finished second, but he would have collected the points for second, and he could have carried them to the next race and the next race, and it kind of would even itself out, and you get a better picture. It's just where the nose cone fails is one-off events, because you get this the proportion, the punishment kind of doesn't fit the crime in a sense, because you can lose a whole championship on just a stone or a curb, and it doesn't seem right. And I admit it doesn't feel right. But the only real solution is multiple rounds, so the penalties can even themselves out. Stuff like electronic sensors, and it's just like, I'm not sure people appreciate how much racing goes on in a day at a kart race. There's so many races, there's so many incidents. If you started putting all these sensors on karts, it just becomes a bit of a bureaucratic mess. And I know series have used cameras before, but if you're a club race, you can't do all that. You have to have a system that's gonna be black and white, and the nose cone drop down penalties kind of work. So yeah, it's a difficult one. It is a difficult one. I understand people's frustration, but I just don't think people appreciate how bad it was back in the day. It was really bad, and the nose cone penalties have worked. I don't like pods. I don't like them. My solution is get rid of them and deal with the consequences of contact. You flip or crash or whatever. That's the way I would personally choose to race if it was my decision. But people are more risk averse now. So yeah, I think it's horrible, but I think what's happened is this injustice has been fixed. We've got a new injustice, but it's a smaller injustice. And you've got an availability bias. You only see that. You don't see the things that the drop down has actually solved, which is a shed load of accidents. But that's modern karting, and I don't know. I don't really have much motivation to talk about modern karting. I don't really watch the senior OK Championship. It's just, may as well call it Formula 5. It's like a junior plus, because all the drivers are going to be in Formula 4 next year racing cars. I've got no interest in it, really. But the juniors I kind of do. I think it's kind of cool. So it's a shame for Freddie, but if you want karts covered in plastic, then I just can't see any other option that the nose cone is here to stay. The nose cone drop down penalties. So, you know, thanks for watching. I wish I was out at the track, to be honest with you. I don't enjoy these videos anymore in the garage talking about karting. It makes you feel like a bit of an imposter, a fraud, because you really want to be driving and doing stuff like that. I don't know what I'm going to do with this lump. If you're interested in buying it, you know, please get in contact. But yeah, I just feel for Freddie in that. But honestly, all the other solutions just don't seem workable to me. So if you've got a system that's workable, great. I'd love to hear it, but I haven't heard anything yet. So yeah, thanks for watching, and hopefully one day soon I can get to the circuit. Who knows?